Today we're talking to Jessica Cannon, who is an author, speaker, certified public accountant, and caregiving advocate, who's on a mission to teach caregivers how to protect their health and well-being while creating a cultural shift toward the worldview of preventing dementia.
Well, I'm a wife, mother, sister, daughter, and now I've become a caregiver advocate. So I started off my professional career in business management and then transitioned into becoming an accountant. I found my niche, what I was good at. And after 20 years of working with financial statements, I got that calling, one I never expected to receive so early in life. But I got the calling to step away from the corporate world and become my mother's essential caregiver. This leading into this caregiver journey, it's strengthened my faith in God. It has made me more spiritual. It's opened me up to understanding quantum mechanics, believe it or not. But I also now understand that the smallest details can still have big impacts.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, wow, what a journey you've been on. I'd love to dive in, obviously, into this, unique perspective of being an accountant. But if you're comfortable, do you mind sharing a little bit more about your mom and, what she was diagnosed with and what that was like for you?
Sure. So during the years as I was building my career, Mom was a teacher. She had definite routines that she had to maintain. She also was living very successfully, in most cases, with manic depressive bipolar disorder. So a lot of the symptoms that were the early on stages, we didn't recognize because we saw a lot of that as just being her emotional, typical roller coaster of highs and lows. Or unfortunately, society sometimes says that she's just being the hormonal woman. But as the years went by, those changes that we were somewhat normalized to and used to the highs and lows. So we knew when to hide, basically, and when to avoid the erratic behaviors became just too much to handle. And after, I think, her first 10, 15 years, because we've been in this for a really long time, she finally had some health issues that gave light to her first diagnosis, which was vascular dementia. Then a couple years after that, I would say roughly 5 or 6 more years, she had another diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. At this point, she's in her mid-50s. Couple more years, and at that point where I finally stepped away, my mom was finally diagnosed with the third and somewhat final form of frontotemporal dementia. And so her form is not similar to the form that Bruce Willis's family has explained as far as the language side goes. I believe because she was a language teacher and knew multiple languages for so long, that helped that area of her brain to keep it strong. So my mom is struggling with the behavioral side of it, which that combination between the manic depressive bipolar disorder and dementia, it was just throwing a powder keg into all of it. And it made it where you couldn't just say, oh, Mom's fine. She can live on her own. She's doing fine. She was not doing fine. So this journey that we've both been on now has taught me so many things. And she's still teaching me to this day as she's declining and unfortunately getting closer to her end.
Yeah, that's a lot to take on. My mom has passed, but also lived with bipolar disorder, and that made for a complicated relationship for us. I'm curious, I guess. I'm jumping ahead probably a little bit, but what was that like when you stepped into a caregiving role? And I don't know what your relationship was like, before this, but you mentioned needing to like hide or duck away.
Right.
Sometimes, like, what was this emotionally like for you to take on a caregiving role for someone who I'm sure it was complicated to live with previously.
Definitely. Oh, when I stepped into this, I stepped in knowing it was partly love, because yes, this is my mother, but the rest of it was obligation and feeling that familiar, this is my family, I have to do this. And since I had only been able to get 20 years into my career, and over the years, begging and pleading with her, Mom, please just do this. Mom, please try this. I was angry. It was really difficult to step in and say that part of me, that judgmental part, saying, you were told to not do this over these years and you decided to do this. And now this has happened and now I have to help you. And it was really difficult. And after stepping away from all that I had worked so hard to build and pretty much what became my identity, because I'm the accountant, it was, well, who am I now? Now I didn't see it as I'm her daughter helping, but I didn't quite understand it as I'm now your caregiver either, because there was just so much of that in between of, well, she can do these things. And I visually see this grown adult. And we did have those good days. And just, I couldn't find that consistent area of not being angry and not saying she's just being lazy. She's just being difficult. So it was a challenge.
Yeah, I believe that. Last question before we dive into some of the, like, sort of point of this podcast, but, how is it now? Obviously that transition you just described was, confusing and challenging.
Right.
Now that you guys have, reached later stages, how has your relationship or your feelings about, caregiving or whatever sort of label you want to put on it, how has that changed now?
Well, thankfully, over the years, that relationship improved because what I needed to do as an accountant, I needed to know why. And so I started doing the research and I started looking into her background. And when I did that, I felt like this is a God thing because it helped me see my mother as a human being who was doing the best she could to get by with the conditions she was living with. And so I finally started to have a lot more compassion, a lot more understanding. And then we had the conversations that I wished we had when I was growing up, but we were finally able to have those conversations later. And the more I saw her as this person living with dementia, not just my erratic, hormonally challenged mother, it made a huge difference. So now, as I'm watching her decline more, I know what's happening. I understand it, but I'm still feeling like that little girl that's reaching out going, no, Mom, don't go yet. Don't go yet. So it's still been one consistent thing is change.
Yeah, that's what they say. Change is the only constant. And yeah, I mean, so complicated, just family relationships. So thank you for sharing all of that. You touched on, starting to build your career as an accountant, and then stepping into this caregiving role. Can you talk about how being a CPA has made you a more effective caregiver, or how it's, influenced how you give care?
Right. I think this helped me be the better caregiver that I could be, just because when I stepped into a role of her caregiver initially, I was still in that mindset of accountant. I was still trying to review historical data, create the projections, track the trends, do all of those deep dives into the research. And so stepping in that way, I did step in an objective way at first before the emotions started to take over. So when I started to look at her medical data and review her habits, I was able to kind of get that perceived projection of, oh, wow, if we don't make drastic changes right now, this is where we're headed. And unfortunately, you have to have a willing participant to make those kind of changes. And so we are, unfortunately, where I assumed we were heading. We got there a lot faster, but it is what it is. And now, taking that continued accountant mindset, I've continued to research to see, what does this mean? how did this originally present? How did we not see this? Why did we not see this sooner? Aside from the bipolar issues, what can we do about it, if anything? And selfishly, how do I stop this from happening to me?
I don't know that that's selfish. I think that's, a unique situation that caregivers get put into. That's forward thinking in a way that I don't think we do at large. How do I stay healthy? Who's going to take care of me? What do I do later?
Right.
I guess on a personal note, I guess in addition to your professional career as an accountant, on a personal note, how did stepping into a caregiving role, impact your thoughts of, spending and saving or thoughts of the future financially?
Definitely. Well, it was a huge reality check because stepping into this role, you don't realize that, excuse me, you don't realize how expensive this way of life is until you become that caregiver. And especially like I stepped away from the corporate world, which means I stepped away from my level of income. So if mom isn't able to afford things and I need to contribute, now it taxes our family and my future retirement savings to provide for her. So what it really did was give me that sense of urgency that I need to beef up my savings a lot more. I need to learn about what does it mean to self-insure and what is that going to look like? And how do I create the boundaries of this is how much we need to live off of, and this is how much I need to keep in mind of a growing savings balance for that pending future that, it may or may not happen. But when I looked into this stuff for my mother, gosh, it was disheartening to find that the long-term care policies that she could have had years ago before her first diagnosis, but she said, I don't need it. I don't need it. It's okay. We can go without it, just for the idea of being able to save money. And now it is costing so much more. And she did need something more than what she had prepared at that time. Being able to depend on Medicare and Social Security, a lot of people use that as their plan B, and it's not intended to be something that we can live off of. It's supplemental. And so it has proven to me how much more I need to save, our family needs to save, for us to be prepared for these possible expenses. Although, looking at it now, I mean, mom didn't think that she was, as a teacher and building her retirement, she never expected to need assisted living or memory care. So she didn't expect to need $500,000 or over $500,000 for just the expected time period of that 3 to 9 years of decline. It's just a sticker shock, really.
Yeah, I think sticker shock is a good word. I think that that is what a lot of caregivers experience, is sticker shock and probably a sense of like overwhelm. Like, what are we going to do? Where does this money come from?
Yeah.
From your professional experience and also now your personal experience, and now becoming an advocate for other caregivers, can you talk a little bit about how caregivers can set up, bumper pads for these, unexpected costs or potentially expected costs? Like, how can people start to make a plan towards this?
Well, one of the areas, of course, as an accountant, making a budget. Not everybody likes to do this. Not everybody knows how to do this, but creating the budget has been something that has helped me the most, not only in my own finances, but for my mother's finances, because it's one of the things that helped me track what she was spending, where it was all going, what were the higher areas, and how we can maybe reduce some of that spending. And then the way I created her budget was it outlined basically what was going to be needed when it came time for her tax preparations. So not only did I know her medical expense, because not everybody understands the tax language of your adjusted gross income. You're allowed to deduct what's in excess of $7,500 of your adjusted gross income. Well, in order to figure this out for her every year, I used her budget and the spreadsheet that I created for her to find how much was spent on prescriptions, how much was spent on doctor's visits, lab work, and other medical inpatient or outpatient type of things, and what was spent on her long-term care expenses. Seeing that helped twofold: manage it during the year and prepare at the end of the year for taxes.
Yeah, I think budgeting is like not that sexy. People don't like talking about it, but I think it can it can help a lot and like provide a lot of peace of mind. You mentioned a spreadsheet. I imagine you built that yourself because that sort of falls into your wheelhouse.
Right.
I guess two questions. One is, what did you like about the system? What do you like about the system for managing money? What could be better? And then I guess a follow-up question is like, where can other people start if Excel isn't their thing or they've never built a budget before? What's sort of like square one if someone's trying to set this up? That was a lot of questions at you.
I totally understand that because that's what I've talked with other caregivers. So you're absolutely right. Not everybody loves spreadsheets. I'm a geek that way. But even if you're not tracking them in a spreadsheet, have some sort of list somewhere, whether it's a pen and paper notepad that you jot down what are your monthly expenses, just so you have an actual idea. Because what happens most, and I've seen this with both of my sons even, is it's paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth. That's how we have learned to live. And the idea of savings is unfortunately last. It is so last, it's scary. And so one of the things that helped them understand this at this point in time is creating savings accounts. If you have a checking account, have 2 savings accounts. There's no limit on how many you can have. Separate it out. So you may not be seeing it in a spreadsheet, but you'll see it in your bank statement. And the key to this is having self-discipline. It's not a matter of saying, oh, I got paid and this month I have an extra $200, so I'm going to go shopping. Okay, let's say maybe we put $100 of it in savings number 1 and $100 in savings number 2, and we don't shop this month. We're going to shop next month when we have a little bit more built up in savings number 1. And the difference being is one is your mad money, so to speak, and the other one is your emergency funds, because we all drive cars and have car repairs that happen when we least expect it, or home repairs or appliances, stuff that when we least expect it. What do? We have either a credit card to jump to that has incredible amounts of interest, or we have that emergency savings to pull from. The other thing is utilize your 401ks. If you're a caregiver and you are still in the working world, utilize 401ks as much as possible, because the employers that have matching 401ks, that's free money. Take it. You put in $25, they put in $25. You have now $50 in your savings. Just take advantage of things like that. And then other areas, one of the things I learned after I became a caregiver were things like going to companies like Schwab. And let me just say, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. It's just worked for me by having the Schwab Intelligent Portfolio. I thought I was going to have to learn how to be a broker or learn the market and start watching the news more often so I can manage things. And it was a huge relief to say, here's X amount of money, manage this. And this is what's helped me manage my mom's funds, so that she does have what she needs, and what she's not using yet is still growing in the market.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that anytime we talk about an emergency fund, everyone's first example is car breakdowns, because I think that's the most like, oh shoot, yeah.
Yeah.
And tires are not, inexpensive, or any car repair.
Especially now after COVID. Everything is far more expensive.
It's wild out there.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about, you left your job, you've come home, you are funding some of your mom's care. If you're comfortable, do you mind sharing a little bit about, what are the other funding sources for your mom, and how did you think about like how much money you're going to need to save or make, et cetera, to fund her care?
So because she was a teacher for so many years, she did have, and she still has her teacher's pension. But what's happening now is my mother, who will soon be 73 years old this month, she was grandfathered in. So new teachers coming in aren't necessarily getting as high of the benefits as she's received. So between her retirement benefits and then adding in Social Security, she's able to have some money to be able to support herself. And before assisted living became an issue, that was more than enough. She was always the saver. She always lived on the least amount she possibly could get by with and saved everything else. Now, then assisted living becomes part of our day to day, and that savings is a joke. It was just nowhere close to being enough. And so now being able to see what assets she has, having to liquidate what she had, housing, and other, vehicles, everything liquidated so that that money that was liquidated or became available was invested so that we can maximize it as much as possible. But other areas like the little things where she needs the day to day, even if her assisted living is covered, because that's the bulk of it, that's the huge chunk of it, there is still the day to days of the toiletries. And sometimes there's, thankfully now, because she is on hospice, the toiletries, some of them are covered. The undergarments, I don't like calling them adult diapers. It just sounds so crazy. But the undergarments that are needed and other things related to oxygen that she has to have. And so there's a difference between what insurance pays and what hospice pays. And then whatever falls out from that is going from her monthly income.
You're just juggling a few things.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah. You've mentioned, insurance playing, a bit of a role here. Can you talk a little bit about how, what you've learned and how other caregivers can avoid becoming victim to our healthcare and insurance systems?
Yeah. So just like not everybody is open to using spreadsheets, not everybody understands insurance. And the thing that kind of hurt me this past year even was wondering who pays for certain items. For example, hospice. Hospice is paid through Medicare. Well, this past year from 2022 to 2023, Medicare increased the rate for providers. My mother has been on hospice for the last year now, and from July of 2022 to December, there was a decline. There was a noticeable decline. And now the decline is happening faster than it ever has the whole entire time. But I was told that she was going to be graduating off of hospice. Made absolutely no sense at all until I started asking and going into the networking environment of what's going on, what happened. And that's when I found out about the provider rates for Medicare. And I realized, oh, this isn't a medical decision. She's not graduating because she's improved. They're trying to get her off of Medicare so they can put her back on and get those 2023 rates. It's just an ugly side of caregiving when we rely on these systems to get our health needs taken care of. But if you don't understand that insurance, yes, it's there to help you get your needs, it's still a business and they're in the business of making money. As an accountant, I understand that. But as a caregiver that's trying to make sure my mother has her needs covered, it is infuriating because now not only did I learn about the financing and doing her investing, now I need to learn about insurance and what is allowed, what is legally allowed, and what is not.
Where did you go to learn this? How did you start to get into the nitty-gritty of the insurance landscape and learn what you need to know?
So I started actually going to the Medicare website. I believe it's medicare.gov, or There's another acronym, CTS, something like that, .gov. But, and be careful because there are some out there that are sales websites, so don't take that to heart. I started researching there. I know a lot of this material is dry as all get out. If you're needing something to fall asleep to, that's where you go. But for me, I had answers that I was searching for. And so I sifted through to figure out what is allowed, what is not. For example, hospice. This is another area that, and I keep going back to this because eventually caregivers are in this, regardless of what your loved one, if it's dementia or not, eventually the end is this need for hospice. And when my mother was transitioning and initially to hospice, you get the approval from the doctor. The doctor held his approval unless I decided to use the provider that he wanted to recommend. That is illegal. So I found this on Medicare explaining that they are only allowed to provide 3 choices at the very least for you to choose this one, or that one. They cannot hold their approval hostage if you don't do what they say. That's not fair to the caregiver out there that is just trying to provide the best service. And especially if it's a service you disagree with, because referrals, the rest of this is asking your friends and neighbors, what did you experience? Where did you go? Who did you use? And then you have some of that referral information to fall back on too, aside from reading lengthy documents. Not everybody goes for that. I'm just weird that way.
Well, I think it speaks to a couple of things. Like, it's good that you're doing research, and I'm glad the information is out there, but also it needs to be more digestible for people so that you don't end up in this situation that you just described. You were able to go back, I imagine, and say, I know differently. I want other options, but
exactly.
It's a bummer that information isn't more easily understandable or digestible for people who aren't going to, sift through the whole Medicare website.
Yeah, that is a huge problem because when we need answers, there is so much information. Some caregivers will say there's nothing out there. It's out there. It's just how it's out there. It's not accessible for the actual day-to-day family caregiver or even professional caregivers to understand. But they're the ones that have the legal departments that can explain things to them, right?
Yeah. In a clunky transition here, speaking about digestible information, you wrote a book, The Proactive Caregiver. Can you tell us a little bit about, what motivated you to write the book and about the book?
Definitely. So after meeting so many different caregivers in various situations and then attending more and more support groups, I kept hearing the same questions over and over again. And so I thought, well, again, I'll go research these questions and figure it out, because some of the questions were the same ones I was having. And the answers I found went above and beyond just the caregiver dilemma or the uncertainty of what's happening and why. It gave me peace of mind, and it set me free to the idea of, wow, this is how dementia crept into our life. This is how it stole and destroyed our family. This is what stole my confidence even, and Mom's ability to thrive. And so I felt compelled. Okay, now I know this. What do I do with this? And so I wanted to write a book that was explanatory. It was the cathartic process for me as well. I wanted to warn the public and hopefully stop this growing epidemic that dementia is becoming, because it is preventable.
Yeah. You talk obviously in the book about being a proactive caregiver. Can you talk about what, how do you define a proactive caregiver? What does that mean?
Yeah. So in my opinion, a proactive caregiver is someone who deliberately prepares for uncertain outcomes financially, legally, emotionally, medically, and even spiritually. Proactive caregivers, they are the ones that guard their health. They want to prevent becoming the care recipient themselves, because I've learned this time and time again. We cannot take care of our loved ones if we don't take care of ourselves. I want to help them stop being exhausted and emotionally beaten down. And so the proactive caregiver steps into this role in a way that stops the reactive nature and starts preparing you for the potentials, the possibles, the likelihoods.
Yeah, I think that's I have not yet read your book, and I am excited to, because I think these are the, questions that people are asking, especially early in their, caregiving journey, or foreshadowing, a potential future caregiving journey.
Right.
You talk in the book about caregiver compliance. Can you talk about what that term means and how caregivers can achieve caregiver compliance?
Yes. So this compliance refers to the family caregiver, whether they are an adult child or a spouse, even, especially if there's a spouse that has the blended family, multiple marriages, that type of situation. But it's basically being legally protected and prepared well in advance, because caregivers need to have at least 5 legal documents set aside that are created, notarized, filed, and multiple copies made so that they are provided to every single doctor, hospital, physician, whatever their medical needs are, that everyone has this. Those documents are the medical power of attorney, statutory durable power of attorney, the HIPAA authorization, an advance directive to physicians, and their declaration of guardianship. Now, that's a lot of information, but unfortunately, we live in a world where the legal system has to step in some cases. And in my own personal experience, being a caregiver brings out sometimes the ugly side or the hurt sides that have not been healed. And so sometimes there is a need for the legal intervention.
And you mentioned, like a spiritual or emotional, sort of this softer side of caregiving. Taking care of ourselves is, an essential part of being a caregiver. We can't provide good care if we're not providing good care to ourselves.
Right.
I think this can be hard, and it's advice that I think we see all over social media, and it's everyone's sort of first tip is like, take care of you first. I don't want to give away too much of your book, but, can you talk a little bit about like how people can do this in a realistic sense, or even an emotional sense, like take out the guilt of like, self-care isn't bubble baths necessarily. It's like eating well or whatever it is, but how do we mentally shift to be okay with taking care of ourselves first?
Right. We're taught early on to take care of, do your things, like do your homework, get your chores done, do all these things that have to happen first. And those, at least that's something that was really ingrained in me. Do this first before you get to go play and have fun. Now, as an adult, we need to do the reverse of this. We need to remind ourselves that we need to schedule time that is for us to laugh. And, it sounds cliche, live, laugh, love, but we need to laugh and lighten the spirit within us. Self-care, some people say, oh, that's getting my hair done, that's getting my nails done, I'm going to go get a massage. Yeah, that's a form of it. But self-care is also being financially well, being mentally well. So therapy, if you feel like the world's weighing down on you as a caregiver and you have no idea what to do. And for me, my time in the shower was my time that I got to cry and just let it all out and then get myself together and put that smile on and continue my day with my mother. Stuff like that has to happen. I mean, us trying to be strong only makes us weaker. And it's ironic when we see it that way. So when you take the time for mental self-care, emotional self-care, practical even, being organized, I mean, it is all in the effort to reduce your stress in life, because stress is the other side of what contributes to dementia.
I have this, I was taking care of my dad for a while after my mom passed, and I was not taking care of myself. And I took a photo of myself one day where I just looked like horrific. Like you can just see how bad I look. And I'm really glad I took that photo because it's been a reminder since, like, just of like how bad I felt and like how unfunctional I was for everyone else. Because I was like, I can't let go of this control. And I'm glad I took that photo as a reminder now that it's like, I have to take care of me in order to take good care of other people too.
That's perfect, because unfortunately, sometimes those reminders tend to be the hospital.
Sure.
When the caregiver has burned themselves out and some doctor is telling them, have you had enough water? What have you been eating lately? How much sleep do you get? I mean, yeah, we need those reminders.
Definitely. You've been caregiving for a while now. What do you know now? Obviously, you know a lot of things. You wrote a book, but if you could sort of boil it down to those that are listening, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started your caregiving experience?
Oh, what I know now is how much the business of aging has become a deterrent. I wish I knew early on that I was going to be faced with these challenges so that I wouldn't have so much anxiety and so much shock to deal with when I needed help. I would also throw in the fact that what I know now, every decision I made 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago affects my present time now. And so making healthier choices will make a world of difference for every caregiver. And even if some say, I'm already however old they are, it's never too late to start. Just never is.
Yeah. Can you give an example of what you mean by, like, what kinds of decisions are you thinking of when you say that?
Yeah. So, the looking into planning, proactively planning. If you plan a wedding, if you're planning a funeral, there's always this salesperson out there that is ready to make money. Well, this is the same thing for the family caregiver. There's always someone that is promoting a service, whether you really need it or not. And if there's other options that are less expensive or in some cases free, that's the business side of it. And I've talked to so many caregivers who experience horrific situations in connection with hospice, which is supposed to be beautiful and helpful and stress relieving, but not all hospice companies are created equally. So that side of it was something I never expected. So I wish I could have told my earlier caregiving self, heads up, this is coming and you need to be prepared. And then the other side of it with the being healthier, knowing that you're going to work yourself because of the control factor, you're going to work yourself down to illness, and you need to start fortifying your body now. So eat healthier foods, get in way more green, healthy, rich green salads, cleanse your gut as soon as possible, and don't put more crap in it so that you have the energy and the stamina and the peace of mind to wake up every day and do this job day after day until they take their last breath. And even still, it's still up to you. You have to continue to take care of yourself after that point, because self-care never stops.
Yeah, you mentioning more leafy greens, that's probably good life advice just for all of us forever.
Yes.
Thank you so much for, sharing so much of your story and, how your professional life has impacted, your personal life and your caregiving experience. If people would like to learn more about you and your story and your book, where can they find you?
Absolutely. You can go to www.proactivecaregiver.com. You can find the information. I have blogs, I have a podcast, I have the book as well that they can purchase from there. And The book is on Amazon and Walmart, online, Barnes and Noble. There's a couple of different places that it's at that you can actually search and find. But the fastest way is the proactivecaregiver.com, because you get several other bits of information there as well.
Awesome. We'll be sure to, tag you once this is live. Anything else? Any, final tips or parting thoughts for, those that are listening?
Definitely. And it's what I want to drive home, that thought. Self-care is not selfish. Being proactive means you're being selfish for yourself in a way that helps you and your loved one in the long run.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your time and for, sharing all of this. I think it's really valuable to people to hear.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me be here.